I'm going to take it right from the top here, if that's cool with everybody. So assuming you're comfortable with dragging your viewport so that they're oriented more or less like this, well, then we're going to be off to a good start. So first off, we're going to start by importing everything that we just worked on in SketchUp. So we're going to go up to File. We're going to scroll down to Import, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to pick the one that we just saved out. So I'm going to pick this one. It's the object file. We're going to go ahead and we're going to hit Open. Import objects. Very good. Object names. Awesome. We'll go ahead and hit OK. Great. So that just imported everything. We can see the view is a little bit warped, so no worries. We're just going to be able to use a rotate to fix that right up. I'm going to also recommend having ortho mode on right now, just because we want to make sure that any rotation we're about to do here is a nice 90 degrees. So ortho mode right down here, we'll click and make sure that that is on. So we're going to left click and drag over everything. We're going to zoom in. We're going to pick ROTATE and hit enter. And we're going to pick a point on the y-axis here, I guess, in the right view. And we're going to left click. And we're going to specify a point way out here. And again, this is where having your ortho mode on is going to be really valuable, because you're going to stretch out and make sure you're along that axis, because you want to make sure you're grabbing everything and making it so that when you rotate it, it's all rotated and it's flat. So we'll scroll out here, we will left click, and we're going to drag, and just like that. See? Ortho mode, very valuable right now. We're just going to snap it right up like that so that it is flat on the ground plane. Wicked. Now, before we go any further, we're going to play with our workspace a little bit. And I know that everything I just threw at you guys before, jumping around different views, is a little bit hairy and tricky at times. So we'll make a point of going through that nice and slow this time. So I'm going to suggest putting your right view at the top right portion of the screen and your top view at the bottom. Okay, great. So once it's all tricked out like this, I think we're ready for the next step. And we've already checked and made sure that our project is in the correct units, meters. Yep, okay, we're good to go. So the first thing that we're going to make sure that we do here is this section that we're cutting through. Let's say that we want to create a section oblique that's essentially going to cut through this piece of the building here. The idea is we want to make sure that is congruent with the x-axis here in our top view. So that's, we're working in the top view right now. This line here, oopsies, this line here, or this face rather, needs to be congruent with that axis. So what we're going to do is we're going to scroll out. We're going to left click and drag over everything. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a move. So we're going to pick M for move, M-O-V-E, and hit enter. We'll go ahead and grab any point that essentially shares a wall with what we're going to try to be coplanar with. So we'll pick this one. We're going to drag it up, and we're going to make sure that we're dragging it so that it is sitting somewhere on our x-axis. So we will left click. Perfect. So now this point is touching. Now we just need to rotate it so that this face is concurrent with this face. So how are we going to do that? We're going to left click and drag over everything. We'll zoom in. We're going to punch in rotate, so R-O-T-A-T-E, and hit enter. We're going to pick this point right here, because that's what we want to rotate around. So that's our center of rotation, just like the command alias is telling us. It's asking us for center of rotation. So we will pick it. We're going to scroll out. We will pick this other point here, because again, this is what we want to have meeting that axis. So we will left click and drag all the way down here. Perfect. And again, having your snaps on is really going to be useful at this stage, because as you can see, thanks to ortho mode, we're snapping right to that axis. So we'll tap left click. Is everybody okay so far? That all sounds good? Okay, awesome. So now we're going to still be in our top view. We're going to use the cube command, or sorry, the box command rather. And what this is essentially going to do is, I know this is really what dictated a lot of our shearing and different stuff like that, because it gives us an easy corner to grab onto. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to pick the box command. We'll tap left click, and we're going to specify our two corners of our box. We're going to make sure they are essentially encapsulating all of our work that we have inside of our project here. So we will tap left click, drag our cursor outwards, just so that it's now encasing everything inside of our model that we've imported. We will tap left click once again. And then we're going to scroll upwards once we're in our right view or our front view. And we can see that we're going to give this, this box some actual volume. So we will tap left click. And again, it doesn't need to be sky high. It just needs to be big enough that it's large enough to encase everything that we've got here. So, great. We've now drawn it so that it's big enough. We're just going to go ahead and shuffle it down a little bit so that, you know, we want to make sure that the ground plane of our model is handily within our box. So, in order to do that, we're just going to go ahead and pick this box we've created. We're going to tap MOVE for move and hit enter. And because you don't want to get snapping to anything that you don't want to snap to, we want this to just be a nice vertical move. We're going to pick anywhere out in space here. It can be out in the front or right views. We're just going to make a point of picking a spot, and thanks to our handy ortho snaps, we're able to drag our cursor, and it'll be a nice vertical move that's, you know, straight down about this right projection. So we'll pick left click. Great. We'll zoom in here. He doesn't need to be in here. Okay. Great. So now we've got our model, and we've got it inside of our box. Is this sounding okay so far? Okay. No questions? Okay, awesome. Great. So, right now we've got this in wireframe, so we can see, yeah, all the stuff we want is inside there, so that's great. We're going to left click and drag, and we're going to group all of this together so that we'll be warping the whole mess of stuff as one. So we'll punch in GROUP and hit enter. And now, if we try to select it, we see, oh great, that selects everything. That's perfect. That's exactly what we want. Okay, let's move over to our top view for a sec here. So we're in our top view, and now we're going to chat about scale 1D. And I know this is where the shearing and scale can get a little bit weird, so I'm going to try to go nice and slow. And again, anyone gets confused, just call out and we'll figure it out. So, in top view, I'm going to punch in scale 1D. We're going to hit enter. It's going to ask us to select our objects to scale. Okay, this is what we want to scale, so we're going to left click and drag over everything and hit enter. Now it's going to ask us to specify a base point. And I know this is where it is really, really valuable to have both your top view and your perspective view that you can look in. Because when I move over to my top view, I want to select the bottom left corner, but I see that I'm not actually selecting the bottom left corner if I pick this. I'm picking the bottom, the top left corner rather. So that's where, and again, when I'm moving my cursor around in top view, if you guys look over in perspective view, are you able to see the cursor as it's moving around there too? Right. So basically the idea is, you know, our cursor's moving in 3 dimensions. We want to make sure that we're picking from the right spot. So we're not going to pick this view. We're going to move over to perspective view, and we're going to make sure that, yeah, we are for sure grabbing from the bottom left corner. And we know it's the bottom left because we're able to see in top view, yep, that's the right spot. We're just now grabbing the bottom of the box. So great. That's exactly what we want. Left click to pick. So once we've got that picked, we're going to swing our cursor right back over to the top view. But now, before we do anything else, we're going to go ahead and give it our scale factor. And I know that one of the worst answers to any question for why something is the way it is because I said so. But 0.7075 just happens to be the number that allows you to do things at a good scale factor when you're working in meters. So again, I'll make sure that is ubiquitously available to you guys for when you're trying it later on, but 0.7075 rather. That's our scale factor. It's one of those things where it kind of just is the way it is. That'll be your scale factor that's going to help you here. So we're going to punch that in the command line, just like I did, 7075, and hit enter. And now it's flopping all over the place. It's doing all this weird stuff. That's all really good. We're going to make sure that we're in our top view, though. And look at this. You see here how it's like, as I move kind of my cursor around in my top view, it's kind of articulating like that. That's good. That's what we want it to do. But we're going to zoom out a little bit. with our scroll wheel, and we're going to drag our cursor up so that now it's stopped flopping around. It's kind of reached its final position, I guess. So once it's done that, now you're ready to pick your next point. And again, you're in your top view, you've got ortho selected, and you're moving along the y-axis. And because you've got ortho on, you should get that little axis inference in that gray line there, just like that. So that's all great. Now we can tap left click. Great. We've just done that first scale factor. So that's step 1 done. So now we're going to stay in our top view. Now here's where we're going to get into the first shear command. So what we're going to do is in top view, we're going to make sure all of our work is selected. And now we're going to punch in SHEAR and hit enter. Okay, so we've got the stuff we want to shear selected. We've initiated our shear command. Now it's going to ask us to pick our origin point. So what we're going to do is we're in top view right now. We're going to opt to pick this point right here. But once again, it's going to be the bottom corner that we want to grab from. So again, we're in top view. Yeah, that looks pretty good. But then when we look over in perspective view, we see that's actually grabbing the top corner, and we want to make sure it's grabbing the bottom corner. So we're going to move our cursor up to perspective view. We're going to drag it down, and we're going to make sure that, yep, that is in fact the corner that we're grabbing from and shearing from. So does everybody understand moving their cursor from the top view over to perspective and like picking the point on the box based on that? Okay, cool. And I know that can be a lot to get your head around. So if I'm going too fast on that, I do apologize. So great. So I can pick that, and as we can see in top view, that's still totally resonant. Like we see that, yeah, we've successfully picked that point. We see in perspective view, we've got it, but we're going to make sure the shear is happening in top view. So we're in top view. So we've got that bottom corner selected. We're going to drag our cursor upwards once again. Grid snaps ortho mode is really going to be your friend on this at this stage. We're going to go ahead and pick it. And now here's where I'm going to suggest we turn ortho mode off just for a moment. And just as you can see, the way I did that is I just moved my cursor down here, and I literally just selected it once and then just selected it so that it is no longer highlighted. Now, again, we're in top view. We've now specified what we're going to warp it about. Now here's where, if you're noticing, if I move my cursor to the left or to the right, it's shearing it, and it's shearing it around that specific corner, that bottom corner that we just picked. So here's where I'm going to specify a shear angle so that, we're not just shearing it at some weird angle. It's a very specific 45. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to make a point of punching in 4 and 5 in the command alias and hitting, or in the command bar, and hitting enter. Did that first shear, is that making better sense now? Okay. Is anyone still horribly lost with the first shear step there? Okay. Great. So again, I know it doesn't really look like much of anything right now, but here's where we're going to go over to the right view, and we're going to do another select all. And again, we're just going to left click and drag over everything. Great. Now once again, we're going to go ahead and we're going to make sure that we're picking the lower left corner here. So what we're going to do is we're going to punch in shear one more time, SHEAR, and hit enter. And we're going to drag our cursor. And as you can see, what you can see in the right view, you can see in the perspective view. So you see we're grabbing the bottom left from where we're being projected over in the right view. And we can see, we can tell it's at the bottom from our perspective view, which is great. So we'll pick that point. We're going to tap left click. We're going to drag our cursor upwards. And you can turn ortho mode back on just so we get that nice 90-degree snap. Alternatively, if you don't want to turn ortho mode back on, you can just go ahead and hold shift down, and that automatically turns ortho mode on for you. So then we're going to drag our cursor upwards so it's at a nice vertical line that is congruent with the Z axis here in the right view, and we're going to tap left click. And as you can see, now it wants to shear for us again, now that we've specified that point. And it's just doing that shear for us in the right view. So now if we punch in 45, so minus and then 45. We're going to see, okay, that looks very ridiculous and crazy in the right view and the perspective view, but if we zoom in on our top view, we see, yep, that is now successfully done all of the warps that we want and shears in order to get us into essentially a elevation oblique. So far, is that sitting a little better with everyone now? Okay, I see some nods. Okay, wicked, awesome, good stuff. So we're going to ungroup this box, and again, like the groups that we make, they're not permanent. Rhino knows we're just doing it for the sake of organization, so we will select this whole mess, and we're going to punch in ungroup in the command line. So UNGO or ROUP, and hit enter. And now that this box has served its purpose, we can just go ahead and delete it. So we'll select the box, delete, and it's gone. So everything's looking good, but now it's time for us to take all this and essentially make it a series of 2D lines, so that we have something that we can kind of work with in CAD and then fix up later on in Illustrator. So we're going to do a left click and drag over everything, select it all, and then we're going to punch in make 2D and hit enter. And yeah, sure enough, we're in view top, that's great. And projection, view, that's all good. That's what we want right now. And then we're going to move our cursor down to OK, because yeah, if your screen is somewhat matching mine, we're in good shape. So we'll go ahead and hit OK. It'll take a minute or two to chew through that. And my video is still recording, good. Might take a minute or so, but no worries. Awesome. Okay, so we've got everything we want here. We see all of our light standards and stuff like that are all good to go. We're well happy with that. Now we're ready to take this right out of Rhino. So we're going to left click and drag over everything, and we're going to do a select on all these great lines that we just exported. Now we're going to go over to File. We're going to scroll down to Export Selected, tap left click. Just for the sake of organization, we'll call this making space, and we'll make sure we give it a date, because I know we always told you guys to do that. I should follow my own advice. I'm the worst for that, sorry. But sure enough, we're for sure in a good file type here. We've got DWG, that's what we want to be exporting it as. That's all great. So we're going to move down to save. And it'll take a minute to kind of produce that. And yep, export scheme default all sounds fine to me. So we're going to go down and we're going to hit OK. So now if we close out of this, and then we open this one, that's what we all just exported. It might give you this prompt, but don't worry. That just means, you know, it came from another program. Nothing to worry about. We'll go ahead and hit continue opening DWG file. Where is everything? All right, no worries. If you have to zoom out a little bit to find your work, sure enough, there it is. It's right in here. So, awesome. Now, same thing I'm always going on about. It is really, really worthwhile to check your units. So if we punch in units, we want to see what Rhino just spat out for us. So we're going to punch in units and hit enter. Okay, now great. It came out as in meters. So that's all perfect. That's exactly what we want. We're already off to a good start. Now if it didn't, if it came out in millimeters, not to worry, just here's the place that you would adjust it. So we'll go ahead and hit OK. Whoa, all kinds of lines and stuff like that here. Okay, awesome. Now, I'm also going to really recommend, before you dive too far into your work, I personally recommend using the distance command to make sure everything you exported is more or less to the size that you wanted. I know that the elevation oblique can kind of warp things a little bit sometimes. Not to worry, that's why we're going to check right now. So if we want to punch in distance, so DIST, and hit enter, we're going to drag over. We're going to pick a point here and pick another point, just an area that we are pretty confident in. So I see, okay, delta X 33.47. Great. So we know it's to the right size and it's in the right units. So we're off to a good start. Now, there's a few things I'm going to really suggest that we have sort of in our arsenal before we dive too much further into any of this. I'm going to suggest that, yeah, we've checked our units. Great. We've checked our distance. Awesome. But if your work comes out as a little bit slanted, not to worry. Sometimes things can do sort of funny things when they're exporting, but we're just going to go ahead and we're going to make sure that our work is, this cutting plane that we're for sure cutting through vertically is 90 degrees, so that we know that when we create a section oblique, we're working from nice square views. So first thing I'm going to suggest we do is, once we're in CAD, we're going to move down to polar tracking, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to make sure that one is turned on. But we're going to go to the right of it, and we're going to specify in the little drop-down menu to the right of polar tracking that it is for sure in 45, 90. Okay, good. As long as it's got 90 degrees in there, because 90 degrees is really going to be what we want at this stage. We make sure that that is what's selected, and I think we're good for our next step here. So, awesome. So, I'm going to suggest also we turn our grid on, because it's just good to be oriented at this stage. Also, your snaps, I think, are going to be really valuable. So if you don't have your snaps on already, that's this icon right here, Object Snap. And as you can see, I've got them all turned on. That I personally like to work with all of them on. But I'm going to for sure recommend you have your endpoints, midpoints, intersections, and perpendicular all turned on at this stage. So, okay, great. Now I think it's a good time for us to create a little bit of a reference for ourselves, so that we're for sure knowing that our vertical elements of our model here are compatible with what we want to do. So what we're going to do is we are going to create an X line, or it's going to be like a guideline to just help us along here. So what we're going to do is we're going to punch in XLINE and hit enter. And again, this is just going to produce an infinitely stretching guideline for us, so that we can see and make sure that what we're doing is all good and it's all geometrically sound. So it's going to ask us what we want to specify for our X line. We're going to pick vertical, or just hit V and hit enter. And just like that, look at this. We're now able to specify a point for this vertical line that we want to add. So we'll go ahead and pick that. We're going to pick this point right in here, just to make sure that everything is for sure vertical. Now we see that this line did come out a little bit warped at times. That's not something to be really too worried about right now. But what we're going to do is we just want to generally make sure that this work that we have here is fairly vertical. Ooh. Oh, that's a little bit funny. Anyway, okay, great. So we see our work is vertical. That's all really great. But we want to make sure that this new line work that we're going to start creating for our section is organized. So what we're going to do is, assuming we don't have layer or anything like that open yet, we're going to scroll. We're going to go ahead and we're going to punch in LAYER, and we're going to get to our layers panel. Hit enter. Once we've got our layers panel open, we're going to move up to the stack of paper here with the little sun next to it. We're going to tap left click, and that's going to create a new layer for us. I'm going to recommend we call this Section-Oblique layer, or whatever you wish. Just for the sake of making sure it's catchy and really easy to understand. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move over to my color. I'm going to double click, and I'm going to change it so that it's cyan. So again, super grabby. It'll be really easy to see the work that we've done. So we're going to go ahead and hit OK. So we'll get OK and hit enter. Great. To make sure that that layer we're working on is now active, we're going to double click our little diamond there. And from there, we've got our new Section-Oblique layer actually active. Okay, so the question is, how do we get from this to something that's a little bit more like this? Well, what do we do by starting here? I know I have windows and everything like that. don't get too panicked about that. You'll be able to trick out your SketchUp model on that, all that as you need to. But the main idea here is we've got this nice flat ground plane that we're working from. So the first thing you're going to do is, again, I really like the X-line guideline command because it lets you produce an infinitely long line that's perfectly horizontal. I'm going to recommend we use that to establish our ground plane right now. So we're going to punch in XLINE into our command bar again and hit enter. And then we're going to hit H for horizontal and hit enter. Great. So now we've got this infinitely stretching guideline here. Let's go ahead and pick our spot that we want to cut our section oblique through. I'm going to personally say, you know, you want to pick something that's will give you enough information and still, you know, doesn't clog the page or anything. So I'm going to go ahead and pick something that's fairly close to this nice flat line that we've got up here. This seems like a good spot to me. So I'm going to left click and pick that spot right there and hit escape now that I'm done picking that line. Great. So here's what I'm also going to recommend. There are some lines that we want to make sure that we're going to bring over with us. Like, a lot of these lines are going to be hidden, but some of these lines are going to be pretty darn important to make sure that we kind of have them on our section oblique layer with us. First one I'm going to recommend is any kind of heavy line work that defines the exterior of this building. So you notice this. You notice that when I pick this, oh no, it's all one big piece. That's not really what we want right now. So if it comes out where your lines here are a big polyline, I personally recommend, because we're going to want to be able to grab different lines, exploding that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that line. I'm going to punch in EXPLODE and hit enter. And great, now it's exploded. That's awesome. Okay, awesome. So now what we're going to do is we're going to grab a few of these lines here, and we're going to make sure that they are coming over to our section oblique layer. And the reason being, we want to make sure these lines are really, really easy to see. Because like for right now, this is kind of the top corner of the building. We want to make sure that is super, super obvious to us as we start drawing our section. So we're going to go ahead and grab this line, these lines, really any key line work that is going to be really relevant to us that we want to make sure that we're, you know, extending our lines to meet in, you know, once we actually start drawing our section. Okay, awesome. I can continue as I need to. But once I've got those all selected, then I can move up to my layers panel, go to drop down, and move down to section oblique layer, just like that. Also, here's something. I know we've talked a little bit about true colors, but you might notice in the case that your colors don't change over or your line work doesn't reflect the color of the layer, here's might be why. If you've just exported it from Rhino, it might do something kind of funny with your CAD color lines. So all you're going to do about that is you're going to move over to Properties, the Properties panel, and you see here how it gives me 255 like this. That's it showing its true color. Now that's something we don't really need to worry about too much at this stage, but we're just going to go to the drop down here, and we're just going to make sure it's set to by layer. So now it's actually showing those lines based on the layer that they're on. So that's all great. So now here's what I'm going to suggest we do. We need to start actually drawing in some lines to give this thing some substance. So when you think about it, if this line was cutting through this chunk of the wall, that means that if it cut, there'd be like this projecting vertical line that it was producing too, right? Because it's cutting through a thick wall. We got to draw that wall out. So here's what we're going to do about that. We're going to go to our line tool, and we're going to make sure that we're working in our section oblique layer. We're going to pick, and here's where I was saying that your intersection snap is really valuable. We're going to pick that point, and we're going to drag our cursor upwards. And you're going to see if we drag it. And again, here's also where having polar tracking on is really valuable. We're able to drag it up, so now it's meeting that top of the corner where this wall would be being cut through. So we'll pick that point right there, and we're going to hit escape. But since this cut line here would essentially stop at that point, because you know, the wall that it's cut through is now we've passed its peak, we're going to go ahead and trim that up a little bit. So we're going to use our trim command, and we're going to trim this extra little piece of line that goes beyond the wall that we're trying to cut through. So let me show you something cool about the trim command that maybe we haven't talked about as much yet. We're going to punch in TRIM and hit enter. Now, in the past, I know I always suggest using cutting edges because I think it's just a faster and a clearer way of getting an idea of what you're cutting from and with. But if you're working in AutoCAD 2023, by just punching in trim and not specifying any further commands, CAD will naturally just let you trim around whatever line it sees it intersecting with. So right now, if I move my cursor over to this without selecting anything further, CAD knows, hey, those lines are all coplanar. You're probably trying to trim this away. Let me just intuitively do that for you. So if I go ahead and pick that, and again, all I really did there is I'll go ahead and do Control-Z again, is I just punched TRIM and hit Enter. I didn't bother hitting T this time. I just moved my cursor up, and in its natural default state, CAD will let you trim any of those extra lines that you don't need anymore. For now, I'm done that trim command, so we'll hit Enter. Great. Now, when we think about it, we are, because of the way we're cutting, and we're making a nice vertical cut here, the way that would work is that would move over to this line right here, and since this is kind of the top edge of the building where they'd have like scuppers and stuff that I drew in, naturally that line that it's cutting through would show a cut to reflect that as well. So the first thing we're going to do is let's go ahead and grab this line here. We're going to go up to our layers panel, we're going to go to drop down, and we're going to make sure we put that on our Section-Oblique layer, because we want to make sure, and we're going to change it so that it's by layer, so that we're going to make sure that that's something that we're now actually cutting through. So we're going to grab our line tool again. With our handy intersect and end point snaps, we're going to grab this point, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to continue that nice cut line. So now we can drag it past here, and as you can see, thanks to our handy polar tracking, we can drag it and hit Enter, now that we've kind of shown what that horizontal element of that cut would do. And again, punch in TRIM and hit Enter. And without specifying anything further, CAD knows, hey, these two are coplanar. You're probably trying to trim that. I'll trim that for you. So that's all really great. Now, here's the great thing about the fact that we're working with lines that are nice and even and flat, is instead of going through the trouble of like drawing, I could draw a vertical line all the way back down to where I'm cutting through, or I could just go ahead and I could take this line and I could just copy it right over. So let's go ahead and try that right now. I'm going to go ahead and use my copy command. It's going to ask us to select the objects we want to copy. I will tap left click and hit Enter once I'm done specifying points. Now it's time for us to specify a base point of what we want to copy. So since we know this corner is right, and we want to make sure this corner is cantilevering off of this corner, we'll go ahead and pick it and drag it over here. Great. So now, as you can see, I know this still looks like a big old mishmash of lines, but for right now, this is all good. Like now, because we've now got a little bit of an actual wall profile cooking here. So that's all really great. Now what we're going to make sure that we do is, because, again, these line, is vertical and everything, we're going to go ahead, and I'm going to recommend we take another X line to serve as a little bit of a guideline, and we're going to draw it all the way across, because again, we want to make sure that these lines are horizontal when we're drawing our when we're drawing our X line. So we're going to punch in X line once again and hit Enter, and we're going to hit H to specify a horizontal line is what we want. So we'll hit Enter, and we're going to zoom in a little bit here. Now have a look at this right now. You see that like I've kind of got the inside, this inside lip here. That basically just means that like here's where, like, this piece in here was like the top of my roof system, and then this piece in here was the little bit of difference that, again, like the lip of the building and the scuppers might have gone. So I see here, if I drag along here to where essentially this cut line is happening and meeting, we see that that's essentially where there would be that little bit of a drop down, and then our roof and everything. So we'll go ahead and pick that. And great. Again, I know this is a lot of lines right now, but then if we zoom over here, we see that if we were to start drawing this line, we see that this, assuming this is a section cut, then this piece will start cantilevering off of this piece, and we can start drawing our wall in that way. So that's exactly what we're going to do right now. We're going to make a new line. We're going to pick a point where this intersects, because again, this is where our section cut would intersect. We're going to left click and drag upwards. Thanks to polar snapping, we're able to see where that goes. And tap left click. And we'll go ahead and trim this, because we know that once it's cut through this, it wouldn't keep extending. So we'll punch in TRIM and hit Enter and tap left click. Great. And again, since it's a nice horizontal ground plane, we're going to go ahead and pick this point, drag across here, and see, and thanks to snapping, we can see what that would look like once we actually cut through the middle part. So we're going to tap trim one more time. You're going to be using your trim tool a lot at this stage. That's totally okay. And then what we're going to do is we are going to draw now the horizontal component, because essentially this line has to actually stop at some other point here. So let's go ahead and do that right now. Grab our line tool, left click, and drag all the way down so that it's now meeting that nice point. And yep, sure enough, we can see this is where our line is meeting. That's great. We're going to hit enter. So I know, again, this looks like a big jumbled mess right now. That's where we're going to use our trim tool, and we're going to just clean it up a little bit more just to get a bit of a better sense of what's going on. So now that we've cut through all this over here, we see we wouldn't really need those lines anymore. So let's go ahead and grab our trim tool, and we're going to clean this up some. TRIM, and hit enter. And again, here's the beauty of not specifying cutting edges. You can just go ahead and drag over everything. And because all this stuff is coplanar, because of the way that we imported it from Make 2D, it's really easy to just blow away all the extra stuff that we don't really want anymore. We can get rid of this too, because that wouldn't exist anymore. All this, a lot of this stuff can go away. I also recommend at this stage, oh, actually a lot of that's grouped, so let's be careful with that. You can kind of delete a lot of the stuff that you just know is no longer really relevant content. Because again, once you cut through this in section, all this stuff here on the back end goes away. Okay, so let's see what we can do here next. We can definitely clean a lot of this stuff up in the background. So again, this is just the way things kind of imported with wireframe. You can go ahead and go through this and delete as you need to. And keep in mind, here's why I suggested moving the outside of the building over straight away. Because right now you can see, okay, this is the outside of the building, so everything behind this is totally irrelevant to our work. So we can just go ahead and delete this stuff. You know, we don't need it because it would be totally invisible to us in this section view. So there's certainly going to be a big element of cleaning your work up as you go through all this. Oh. Hold on, I don't want to delete anything that's in blue lines. So you sort of get the idea. And again, here's where importing it in Rhino was importing it as Make 2D is kind of valuable here. So you noticed here, see these two lines right here? Those were essentially the top and bottom of our roof system that we had here. And as we can see, we've already drawn the top in, but now it's time for us to draw the bottom. So let's do something with that right now. We're going to punch in XL, X for X line, and hit enter. We're going to specify H for horizontal, so that we draw a nice horizontal line. And then we're going to have a look here, and we're going to see, yep, this is the bottom of that sort of roof system there. And here is where it cuts through our line here, and we can see where it meets this wall section that we've already cut. So we're going to go ahead and pick that point right now. Great. So now we've got a top of this wall, and we've got, or of this ceiling rather, and we've got a bottom of the ceiling. So great. This is all good, but we want to make sure that we're we're trimming everything too. So when we look over here, we see, okay, yeah, this is all great. We drew the actual line here, but we're going to make sure that we also draw the actual wall all the way to the ground. So we're going to go ahead, pick this point, trace our line all the way down here, and luckily we can just snap right to it, and it's perpendicular. Perfect. So that's kind of part of the beauty also of working with working in Section-Oblique, is the fact that because of what you're producing is, geometrically going to be, 90 degrees in terms of where you're doing your cut. A lot of these lines will come out as perpendicular, which is really great. So this is all coming along. This is looking good. But we're going to make, and don't worry, we're going to get into cleaning it up more and making it turn into more of a thing in a second here. But for right now, here's what we want to do. We want to make sure, especially in our section view, that we're doing stuff like blocking in our floor systems, because obviously we included a cool floor system in our model, and this is a great way to reflect that. And Section-Obliques can do an awesome job of reflecting that kind of stuff. So again, we're going to pull up our X line command. We're going to hit enter. We're going to specify H for horizontal once again. And as you can see, because of where we drew our cut line from, and how things kind of shook out in our model, we see here is where essentially those lines of the second floor are, the top and the bottom of the floor are, in relation to our work. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to pick both of those spots. And great. Now, we don't need these extra big, super long lines. So once again, we're going to hop back on our trim tool and hit enter. And we're going to get rid of this guy. And we're going to get rid of this guy. And just for the heck of it, let's go ahead and get rid of all this stuff right now too. So there's going to be plenty of cleaning involved. But you know what? That's okay. That's kind of what it's about at this stage. We'll clean all this out because, again, all this would be invisible. And there's going to be a fair bit of also kind of moving stuff over based on, you know, what relevant lines you want to keep and what lines that you don't. And just so that this section is a little bit less busy, let's go ahead and do a little cleaning of it right now. So we'll do some trimming because this is all going to go. We can get rid of all this stuff because, again, anything in front of our section cut line here that we've got is now totally irrelevant. It's being blown off the face of the earth. We don't need it anymore. So, basically, you're going to get a chance to continue drawing and using cutting and trimming to essentially continue refining your section until eventually it's looking a little bit more like, this rather, in terms of like, you know, trimming things and fine-tuning them as you go along. It's a little bit tedious, but if you got the trim command down and you've already, you know, got your work drawn up in Section-Oblique, you should be a-okay.